It's a podcast. It's a podcast. It's a podcast. It's a podcast. It's the podcast of life. Ooh.
Starring Ben and Bran.
Ooh. Welcome to Ben and Bran See a Movie, the show where Ben and Bran,
See a movie.
that is us, we see movies.
We see movies.
Are back together again.
Mm-hmm.
We are talking a very notable film. I was trying to look at all the films we've talked about. This has to be one of the highest box office earners we've ever talked about. This film that we are talking about grossed 1.6 billion. That's billion with a B. Yeah,
what?
Billion with a B. Billion like Ben and Bran. Dollars. $1.6 billion. That number is absolutely insane. I was trying to look back. I couldn't find any episode that I could think of that went beyond that, because we haven't done stuff like the Avengers movies yet. We haven't done Titanic. We haven't done Avatar, though we'll have to do Avatar in the future probably.
You're right.
And I'm looking at it and I'm like, this is one of the biggest films, just like by numbers wise, of all time. And I can't think of a film that nobody talks about less than this film.
Yeah.
And in case you haven't been able to guess, the film Branson and I are talking about today is The Lion King, the 2019 live action version.
Yes. I feel like this was a fairly contentious movie. Now, I could just be projecting some of the issues. Man, I'm not really playing my cards close to the chest at the beginning of this episode.
Yeah, I think by what I've said, I've already kind of hinted at what my cards might be for this episode.
I don't know if I'm projecting some of my issues with the film onto, what general audiences think, but I feel like this was a fairly contentious film, because there are some choices that are made that are quite interesting, and The Lion King 2019 is a symptom of, I think, a larger problem, I suppose, for lack of a better term. I'll think of a better one probably later. But, The Lion King is a great example of this thing that Disney is doing now, where they are taking previous films that are beloved and classic and, these Renaissance opus films for Disney, and then recreating them in either live action or realistic sort of CGI in a different medium aside from traditional 2D hand-drawn animation.
Let's make no questions about this. They're Frankensteining their own creation, essentially. I think that's what they're doing. They are resurrecting something that hasn't been, maybe not per se relevant, but something that had its definitive ending. They're bringing it back for exploitation purposes, and a lot of it is used in the idea of moving the science forward. I think you could almost say, like, moving filmmaking forward, because we're going to talk about this film. This film is very contentious because it's kind of a visual masterpiece.
Yeah, it's extremely impressive, but that's kind of I finish your thought first. I won't interrupt you.
It's a visual masterpiece, and we have to deal with that. Like, this isn't a film that we can just say, "Oh, this was bad. This never had any real chance of being successful." This does nothing. This is such a film that really just doesn't exist. No, the technology is so important within Hollywood and special effects today that it does matter, and it is revolutionary. Whether you like it or not, this is a technology that has never really been seen before. I'm not saying that there weren't other films like this that Disney had done, or other studios for that matter. This one is a very definitive point where it is like, you're watching it and you're like, okay, that's a real lion on screen. I mean, there's almost no flaws in the special effects work.
I couldn't find any flaws with the CGI, the compositing. I think there are quite a few real landscape shots. But yeah, I mean the work that was done to create these models and the rigging systems and uh, no doubt the particle systems and different ways of using light. I mean, ray tracing is all over this film, I'm sure. But I think that is sort of the problem with this new era of Disney kind of, bringing back the peaceful corpse of
Yes.
of beloved properties. It feels cynical a lot of the time, I think,
Hmm.
because the visuals are so impressive, but beyond that, it's a it's sort of a limp-wristed delivery of
Mm.
the original Lion King story. It feels like a tech demo, you know,
Hmm.
and that's kind of where it stopped, and the story almost feels like an afterthought.
Yeah, you use the word there, cynical, which I think is
Mhm.
kind of the perfect summation of what we're going to be discussing today.
Which
And
it's also kind of a slippery slope to say that, because by calling the movie cynical, I fear that I myself am now being cynical. Because I don't know, maybe I clearly there are people that worked on this film that put time and effort and passion into the, like, there's a reason that the film looks so beautiful, you know.
the, and with that idea as well, where you're talking about like us being cynical on it, or us critiquing and criticizing the movie so heavily, and that kind of leading off this us being cynical, it also puts me in an interesting qualm because it's also me putting value to a film that I essentially don't think has any really artistic value outside of making money. Not artistic value, like there is obviously some, I should rephrase this. There's some special effects artistic value. There's no art value in it, in the sense that there is no storytelling love, there's no passion, there's
Mm,
nothing that
mhm.
feels like filmmaking, kind of come alive. And so when I say that the film, and I'm, being cynical about the film, I'm almost afraid of myself just being too caring about a film that really honestly shouldn't bother me as much as it does. But there's true
Mhm.
reasons I decided when I texted you, Branson, we should talk about this movie. The one is the more, fleshed out, more obvious reason. Pinocchio, directed by Robert Zemeckis, debuted
Mhm.
on Disney Plus last Thursday, so I believe that was the 8th
Mhm.
of September. So that was,
Have you seen Pinocchio yet?
I did see Pinocchio, and I thought it
Okay.
was a slightly better movie than this movie, and I'll explain some of the
Oh.
reasons why. Even though the film is probably technically worse and looks significantly worse, but I'll explain the differences of that why when we get
Mhm.
more into our discussion. So that's the one obvious reason. The
Right.
second one is because we are now in a stage of special effects and Hollywood in that coexistent relationship that has greatly changed since 2019. Obviously, special effects have existed since the first film was ever made, and they
Mhm.
will continue to evolve and get better, and the relationships with the studios will continue to evolve and shape. There's a lot to say, and the last point that I'll kind of wrap up my previous thoughts about, like the idea of this, we're doing this for Pinocchio, and the fact that like special effects have so gradually changed throughout Hollywood, and obviously with the invention of technology, specifically computers, that's going to evolve how quickly something can be processed and not. The point that I'm bringing up right now is COVID happened, obviously,
Mhm.
and so that's one thing that really changes Hollywood. Special effects, you can kind of see it in films right now where they kind of had a rush production because of COVID, because all of a sudden these movies that were supposed to come out and being worked on in 2020, they basically didn't get to start working on them until 2020. And the second, maybe more important thing that happens in Hollywood in terms of special effects and studios is streaming becomes the norm. And with streaming becoming the norm, all of a sudden there's now way more content out there for your disposal, which means there's also a lot more special effects works to be given around, which also just means that there's less people, in special effects for all of the work that is being consuming. I mean, if you look at Disney Plus, because we'll just stick on Disney right now, they have probably right now 2 to 3 projects a week dropping that all require extensive special effects work. That's not like specifically right now. I mean, right now there is only a Marvel show on right now, but I mean, given next week, we're going to have a Star Wars show running. We're going to have a Marvel show running. That's
right. Andor comes out next week.
Yeah, you're going to have like those random Disney movies thrown out there. Like, I mean, Hocus Pocus 2 will be out at some time later in September. Right. There's just special effects everywhere, and that's only on the side of kind of their more main properties. Don't think about like the fact that Black Panther Wakanda Forever is going to be hitting theaters in November. Avatar is going to be coming out in December. You have like Disenchanted. You have The Little Mermaid, which they previewed. You have all these things, and a handful of them coming straight to Disney Plus. The CGI artists are overworked, and we've now heard this story multiple times. I've talked about this multiple times on the podcast.
The crunch culture conundrum.
Yeah,
right.
There's
the
so much work to be done. Yeah, there is so much work to be done. And the CGI artists have made a point to bring it up. Like, yeah, you know why the CGI in like Thor, Love and Thunder looks so bad? Or why Tatiana Maslany and She-Hulk, why it doesn't look fully animated? Because it's not. We have a few weeks to work on these projects, maybe months, and we have to move on and get going, because if She-Hulk, if it doesn't work, we don't have the special effects fully done. We have to start working on another one. It's not this, timing thing anymore, where we can really spend our time making a character look that way. And new characters are obviously going to be hurt, because Incredible Hulk, they have a template on how to make that character. This one they're creating from the ground up. And one thing that I'll also mention with She-Hulk, Tatiana Maslany is not painted green. They have to CGI that character completely from head to toe.
Yeah, that's
so much harder.
Yeah, the entire She-Hulk is a digital double, basically. Yeah.
That's so much harder for the CGI artists to do. And it's
hard to make, if something like that is fully CG, it's hard to make that mesh with real, like having a mixture of practical effects, which would be like stuff that you could do in camera, and then CGI, like visual effects. That's you always get the best result. But yeah, there's like the chokehold, I guess, that
it's
Disney the company has is
it's 1,000 properties that need special effects. And that's just one studio, where every studio has to be utilizing special effects. So there's an overworked, there's an underpaid aspect to the CGI artist.
Yeah, and there's not enough bandwidth to go around, and the suits don't understand what goes into that.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that all these problems stem from The Lion King itself. This has been probably an ongoing issue in Hollywood for a long time, and The Lion King isn't necessarily by any means the cause or the permutation of it all. It just looks like a really easy linchpin to kind of point and say, like, well, this is kind of almost a new chapter, and this kind of feels like the films that like come after it. You can almost see that Lion King effect. Maybe it's not that it actually happened. Maybe it just became so blatantly obvious to a lot of people. And I think it's just a fair point to start on this movie, because we've kind of skirted around this idea. We've talked a little bit about this movie. We've kind of given hints about our ideals of this. I'll just say right now, I didn't prep any notes for this episode. I just wasn't particularly interested. This is the first time I've actually failed at my podcasting like duties. I did not rewatch this movie.
Really?
I couldn't. I really sat there and I was like, I put it on. And by the time we get to the morning report with Zazu, voiced by John Oliver, I was out. I was so uninvested in this movie.
The morning report was where I started to lose faith as well.
Yeah, I was just so
We'll talk about that.
down on this movie. And again, if you're listening to this episode, you could probably point to me and say, Ben, there's minimum 100 films that are worse that came out in 2019. They're just definitively worse. They don't have a cohesive story. The special effects are bad. The acting is bad. Everything about the film does not work and does not seem to understand the basic principles that make film making an art form. And to that, I would say I agree, and I would still probably watch most of those films before I ever had an interest in watching The Lion King again.
I think with this film, it's more about the principle. Mm-hmm. You're taking a beloved property, and it is... okay, you know what? I'm just going to say what my hill to die on is, because I think that it's the best way that I can really encapsulate my feelings about this. Like Ben and I already said, this film is visually impressive. There's no doubt about that.
You can't take it away.
Yeah, absolutely not. This film looks beautiful. But there is no way in hell that this movie stands up to the original. Not when it came out, and it's only going to get worse the further it goes into its lifetime. It has all the pieces of the original, sure, but the glue holding those pieces together is not nearly as strong as the first one. Just because you have all the parts doesn't mean that it will be greater than the sum of its parts. Sometimes it's less than the sum of its parts. You know, sometimes it feels like a off-Broadway production of it, or a school play version of it. Maybe that's a little bit too harsh in one direction, but that's kind of where I am.
Here's what I'll say about this movie and why I so vehemently have disdain for this movie. Again, technically this movie is not bad. If you just like watched it, it is The Lion King. It is just straight up The Lion King. And I want to make it also clear, I don't have like this huge principle on the movie where I don't believe that any of the Disney animated stuff should be touched. I don't have like this preservation feeling or wanting to protect. I don't even have like this huge deep love for the original Lion King movie. I quite like that movie a lot. I think it's a beautifully animated film, but it's not like these things were so precious to me I could never see them remolded or done.
That's kind of how I feel about Pinocchio. Pinocchio doesn't. I don't really have that feeling. Lion King, I certainly do.
Yeah, but. And for me, all of them are like that. There isn't like a single one that I would just be like, you know what? I'm totally out on the idea of this. It is the pattern of Hollywood. I accept that everything is never actually done, and everything will eventually be rebooted until I'm dead and buried in the ground.
Nothing new under the sun.
There is nothing,
except
and once
for this
you accept
podcast.
that,
this podcast has never been done before.
Totally original.
We've been saying that from the beginning.
And like when I'm watching this film, like I said, so I don't come in with these negative preconceived notions of Disney's ruining my childhood, Disney's the evil corporate empire doing this terrible stuff. I have even liked a handful of their live action films. I think The Jungle Book is a great way to do a live action retelling of the animated one. I even like aspects of the Beauty and the Beast reboot that they did in 2017 with Emma Watson. And you know what? From this same year, 2019, I actually enjoyed Aladdin with the Will Smith reinterpretation of it, because that's what it was. That is what that film is. Is it the classic Aladdin from the 90s? Yes, it is, but it's Will Smith interpreting one of the most important aspects of that movie. And I see value in that performance. I see something that I can stand by and say, like, okay, even if a lot of the aspects are just a redoing of the original 90s cartoon, that is a definitive version that feels different and had a creative process behind it, and I can respect the actor for doing that and bringing and breathing in a new life to a franchise. That I understand.
And those are tough shoes to fill too. A
It
Robin
is.
Williams.
When I watch The Lion King, my issue is I am watching the cartoon version. Like point
I
blank.
did not hear like 15 seconds of that.
Oh,
you
so
got
did I
you got
cut?
so mad. Yeah, you got so mad that your audio got bit crushed.
So
Say that
so
again,
what
I'm
I said,
sorry.
when I'm watching The Lion King,
Uh-huh.
my issue with watching this film is I'm just watching the cartoon. There's nothing else to this film. There is no original
right.
idea
Okay.
stemmed in from it. There's nothing of passion thrown into it. There's nothing that feels new or exciting. Minus two voice actors who try their darndest to save this movie. And they are the only aspects of this movie that I like. After that, everything else is the exact same movie I liked in the 90s, just done with a technology that, frankly, is damn impressive. We've already hinted at this. This technology is amazing. It also is completely uncinematic compared to cartoon.
Yes. Okay. That was one of my biggest problems with this film. It is certainly impressive visually. Like I said, like we've said, if you've taken a shot every time we've said that this episode, you're probably already feeling it. But with a film that is all about animals plus a compelling story of loss and confusion and trying to find yourself, emotion is tantamount. You need to have emotion. And with this movie going the realistic route, in fact, Jon Favreau said that he wanted to make it more like a nature documentary, which,
He
good
does.
on
He
him. It
achieves
looks like a
that
nature
goal.
documentary, but that's not the correct way to tell a story with emotion, especially not with animals, because you can't get the facial expressions, you can't get the emphasis, you can't get the classic rules of animation that make those things work, that make those stories work. The original was so vibrant because you can actually tell what the animals or what the characters are feeling without them having to say anything.
Yeah,
In
it's
this
it's
film,
interpretation.
you can't.
No,
It's
there is
hard. It's really
no.
hard to tell what any character is feeling at any given time. I just think Audacity just crashed, so we're going raw dog this episode.
Yeah, we have this current
Whoops.
audio that's being recorded via my stream, so we
Yes.
should be fine.
Should be okay.
Here's the really interesting part that you brought up, because you did bring up a really good point there at the end, as were the rest of your points. I don't mean to imply that anything you before you that was bad.
Would have never
But-
dreamt of it, but now I'm a little suspicious.
Yeah, now you're like, what did he actually mean by that?
I'm a little suspicious.
But here's the thing that I was thinking about, and it's this point you brought up with you can't tell the emotion of the story because of the CGI and the realism of it, because animals just don't have as expressive of faces humans do, and specifically what cartoons do. It's just harder to express an emote in this medium. And one thing in particular that really hinders this movie is, Donald Glover is one of my favorite artists working right now.
Absolutely. Dude's
Beyonce
talented.
is one of the most talented recording artists of all time. Chiwetel Ejiofor is a really dignified, great actor. they're not voice actors. Like, and
Oh,
it's not that even
I'm
that they
so
can't
glad you
be
said
like,
that.
yeah, and it's not that if Donald Glover was in an animated film, I don't think that necessarily is like makes or break the movie. But the issue is when everything's already so toned down to the just like, realism that we've already talked about, where the emotions already feel a little muted. Having these type of actors in this role only makes it feel more muted because they are unable to be expressive. I already hinted at the two who I think get
You have
through
the
this
name,
idea.
but not the presence.
Yeah, and I've already hinted at the two names that I think actually overcome this and actually add something interesting and fun to this movie, and that's Billy Eichner and Seth Rogen. And
I'd
they're the
agree.
they're the best parts of this movie to me. And it's
Seth
kind of like
Rogen. Seth Rogen was certainly my favorite vocal performance. Billy Eichner, it took a little bit to get past the fact that it
it's
wasn't
Billy
Nathan
Eichner.
Lane. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mind Billy Eichner. I think he's funny.
I think
But
he's funny too, but
Nathan
he does
Lane
have
had
that
such an
Eichner
iconic,
verse.
yeah, and Nathan Lane had such an iconic performance. It was a little tough to get over. I think I'm softening to Eichner more as I'm thinking about it. But yeah, I certainly agree with you. Timon
But
and
like
Pumbaa were
what they do so well as actors and specifically voice actors in this role is you can kind of feel them overacting / using their comedy, all of that coming in place to make something feel a little bit more alive. Like Seth Rogen getting to do his iconic laugh. Billy Eichner just like, yeah, screaming, because that's Billy Eichner for you. Like
name a woman.
those two things just work so brilliantly next to each other
Mm-hmm.
that it actually, one, they have a really good comedic timing. They have a really good comedic timing, in fact. And what also happens is and maybe it's a little unfair to fully give it to them because it's also just like everything else in the movie is kind of like just like watching paint dry. That the fact that there's fun performances in it, you overinflate how good those performances maybe genuinely are.
Right.
But regardless, I think that's one of the biggest issues of this film. Again,
An
very
ugly rose
talented
looks great
people.
in a field of weeds.
Yeah, really
That's
talented
that's
people.
an original thought.
Is that an
straight
original
from me.
thought?
Put that on a T-shirt.
Put
That's
that
going to be
on,
printed on a T-shirt. Put
that
our
on a
merch
pillow.
store.
Sew that onto a pillow.
Embroider it onto. Put it above your door frame.
But yeah,
Even an ugly rose is beautiful in a field of weeds.
It's the struggle with this movie, right? Like that, like Donald Glover, as talented as he is, sounds so bored. And it's also the expressions he have are so bored. Maybe if you put that in an animated form where they can kind of do some of the expressions for him, we hear the influx of that voice more. In this, it just feels so dull.
Yeah, and even they brought back
James Earl Jones.
thank you. I was going to say James Earl Ray, but I was like, that's not right. That's presidential assassin. But James Earl Jones, am I correct? I think that's
James
right.
Earl Jones.
Okay, no, James Earl Ray. Did he try to assassinate a president?
Which president?
I don't know. It's one of them.
Are you sure you're not thinking John Hinckley Jr., who tried to assassinate Reagan?
I don't think so. I don't know. Anyway,
okay.
I'll figure it out later,
check.
or someone can correct me in YouTube comments. But James Earl Jones, they brought him back to voice Mufasa, reprising his role, and even he sounds like he kind of phoned it in. I know that he's close to 30 years older now, but
yeah, he is like 90 when he's recording this.
Right.
He's probably sitting in his bed. I wouldn't blame him. He should be.
I mean, yeah, I can't blame him either.
They might have just used his old dialogue, to be honest.
They did. There are a few scenes where they just straight up for a fact they did.
And I'm pretty sure I read that too. So it's just like
the morning report scene.
How original was this?
I'm really excited to talk about the morning report scene because I hate it. But in the morning report scene, when he says, "Morning, Zazu, how's the morning report?" It's the same line. It's probably either an alternate take from 1994 or the exact same take from 1994. Yeah, if you listen to them back to back.
it's this systemic issue with this movie. When we've already talked about unoriginality, and I don't want to like hammer in this point specifically, but it is just this reoccurring issue that you find with the movie. I think, like, so for instance, let's just start at the beginning because we can then jump to the morning report really easily. For the first 5 minutes, I'm in on the movie. Not again like you just like the one. It's the Hans Zimmer score. It's the complete recreation. It's you could call it an homage or a ripoff. Let's say it's more of an homage to the cartoon. It hits you in the feels right away. They have to get the few key points there, but it is just this visual spectacle to watch unfold for 5 minutes, and then of course it then does the hard cut to Disney's The Lion King.
Yeah.
I'm in on the movie. I am in on this movie. Do I know what's about to come? Yes. But at this point, am I completely sold on the movie? I'm completely bought back into the feeling I have when watching the original. It's the morning report scene that I think you start feeling it like something's going off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
there were a couple little things that had me concerned right off the bat. Like the audio mixing is quite weird in the opening number. Like some environmental sound is just not there. The elephants are a great example. I can't remember what line of the song it happens in, but it's all the little birds running away from the elephants and then their footsteps. There's not really any dust. There's no impact. There's no sound of heavy footfalls. It just kind of feels like there was a track muted, like an audio track was muted. So that kind of had me.
it feels weightless. I'll give you.
Yeah,
There's
and
something
I was
with
like,
the CGI throughout that kind of feels weightless,
and
where you're
and
like, it's
since
real, but it's not real.
right, since it's supposed to be realistic, that was that much more noticeable. It's like these are
Yeah,
real elephants, but they don't sound like real elephants. They don't sound like
that's
anything.
the idea, right? Of like, what's it called? What's that term that they Uncanny
Uh,
Valley?
yeah,
It's the term of Uncanny Valley, where it's the idea of you're now making something so realistic that when it just looks slightly off, you can
when one
identify
thing's
it, but don't exactly understand why you're looking at. You can see something so like technically brilliant. Star Wars has the example recently with Luke Skywalker's face in
Mhm.
Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett. You can look at that. You can say that looks incredible, and yet I'm also kind of creeped out by it because something's off, but I can't exactly point to why.
Right.
And that's kind of the same with this movie.
We're intrinsically wired to. This is something that they say all the time on here's your bingo square, Corridor Digital, where there are all these little micro things that we unconsciously are aware of. So then when they're not there, it's like you might as well be missing a nose, you know.
Mhm.
It's like when you take the bass track out of a song, you might not notice the bass. I try to notice the bass
Mhm.
um, in songs just so they're appreciated by someone. But when you take the bass track out of a song, then you notice it. You know something's wrong, but then when the bass track's in, you're not really thinking about it. So that was one thing that kind of had me worried. And then the mouse shot with leading up to the introduction of Scar, I was like, this is going on a little bit long.
Hang on,
This is where
you're jumping a little because I think the morning reports before Scar.
no, Scar's the first dialogue.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, where Zazu comes in and says,
Oh, okay.
"The
Sorry.
king
Go off.
approaches." Um, go off, king. It's the mouse is kind of like scurrying around. It felt like 5 minutes. And it was like, this is starting to feel like a tech demo.
It is. That is a really good like moment, just like a scene where you can just say,
This
"Oh,
could
that's
be
like something."
omitted
Yeah,
or
because
shortened.
I think the scene that we're going to talk about with the morning report is kind of where everything you starts unraveling and the mysticism of this basically creation it starts feeling very Frankenstein. Before we get there, I just want to take a real quick second to plug this show and channel. If you guys are watching this and you're liking this video, make sure to like and subscribe. We're on the road to 100 subscribers. I'm getting really close. By the time you listen to this, I might be at 100. But thank you guys for all the support. Continue liking. And thank you for last week. I had my biggest podcast ever in views. So thank you so much for that.
That's what's up.
Yeah. With that said, let's talk about the morning report, Branson.
The Morning Report, delivered by John Oliver, just playing himself.
He's doing his weekend, not weekend update. He's doing his last week tonight with John Oliver. And here's the thing. I really like John Oliver. I think he's a very funny guy.
I'm fine with him.
I really like this guy. I think the comedy works with me. I think his delivery's really good. I genuinely like the guy and his style of comedy. And in this movie, I mean, they are kind of just asking him to do the last week tonight thing, because it's like, okay, well, we need somebody to deliver the news. Let's kind of do what John Oliver already just naturally does. Who knows, again, if this is the case of, did he even go in the recording booth? He might have. Did he just film this on the last week tonight, set between dialogue punch-ups? He very well could have as well. And it's just again, it's not the idea that John Oliver is necessarily a bad voice actor. I don't think that's the case. He's done other voice acting things. I think he actually even has a distinct voice. But one, they're not giving him the ability to do anything as fun as Rowan Atkinson gets to do.
Yeah,
and two,
that's it.
The comedy falls flat because, again, it's this case in point that I'm going to have to just keep hitting on. There's beats in the original animated film, and I don't like comparing the two movies, but in this case, you just have to compare the two movies.
That was something that I was like, okay, when you texted me, it was like, hey, or when you said, hey, we're doing Lion King, the new one, I was like, oh, then I have to watch the old one as well, just so I have a point of reference.
Yeah. And so I'm watching this scene, right, Branson?
And everything that you just mentioned, I noticed as well.
I'm watching this scene, right? And it's a really complicated scene because, again, it's that I'm having trouble pointing to exactly what I think is wrong in this scene.
Maybe I can help because I have a couple.
No, because I finally figured it out.
Oh, okay.
It is the comedy is missing. And it's not, again, that John Oliver, I think, is an unfunny person, but there's certain beats when you watch the animated film, right? Where Simba steps on his tail and then Zazu kind of goes spitting off, and he's kind of getting this cartoon treatment, right? It's so over the top. He's kind of getting thrown around. In this one, the comedy that John Oliver has to deliver is then juxtaposed to Simba slightly batting him around while he's in the air, like a lion would bat a bird or like a cat would bat a bird. That's kind of what the comedy is reduced to in this film. So it's hard for me to be like, okay, John Oliver is unfunny, when it's like, okay, yeah, he could also just be delivering this and there is no comedic sensibility to the actual animation within this film. And it just kind of becomes this point where I'm watching and I'm like, yeah, there's this kind of huge juxtaposition between what the film source material is requiring this joke to be versus what the joke, how it actually plays out on screen. A bird rolling around and flying around and getting knocked like a Looney Tunes cartoon, it's just arguably significantly more funny than a cat just raising its arm and just kind of swatting at a bird.
Mm-hmm. The issue that I have with this scene, I think, is even more. I think it's a pretty egregious bastardization of the original scene, because the original scene is so much more than Zazu getting pounced on. It's more than just, oh, the morning report, and then this is how we get into the elephant graveyard and hyenas in the area. This is a character establishing moment for both, and a relationship establishment. it shows how Mufasa and in the original film, it shows how Mufasa and Zazu connect with one another, how Mufasa and Simba connect with one another, and how Simba and Zazu connect with one another. In this film, in the new one, it's kind of all over the place. So I'll go kind of through point by point. So in the original film, Simba is uninterested in the report, and Mufasa is listening like a king. And then Mufasa notices that Simba's just kind of jumping around, going after bugs, and he says, "Simba, what are you doing?" And Simba goes, "Pouncing." And in that moment, Mufasa realizes this is a moment that I can use to not only teach my son, but also grow in my relationship with him, like have a nice father-son moment. So he takes a break from being a king to be a dad. Right. There's a clear reason and a good characterization in Zazu's participation in the lesson as well. Mufasa in the original tells Zazu to turn around, tells him straight up, this is going to be a pouncing lesson. So we get some comedy from Zazu realizing, oh man, I'm the thing that's going to get pounced on.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie, it's just Zazu turns around, he turns his back to the king for no reason other than the pouncing scene has to happen. So we're going to force Zazu to do something that doesn't make sense. He's a respectful consort to the king. He's not just going to turn his back. It's for plot convenience that he does this, and that little change derails the entire scene. And then another problem is that Mufasa is the one that's uninterested in the new one, not Simba. Mufasa leans over to Simba almost as soon as the morning report starts and is like, want to have a little fun. It's like, so it's not Simba's childish nature that is drawing his father in to like teach him and like raise him up. It's Mufasa just being a bad king, and then he's torturing Zazu for no reason. Whereas in the 1994 version, it's like, Zazu, I need your help with this. And Zazu just kind of acquiesces and is like, okay, fine. I guess I'll be pounced on. And then Zazu flies away in anger, immediately comes back and gives the report that hyenas are in the Pride Lands. Just kind of came out of nowhere. We don't see any reason why he should now know that. And like, dude, you just effed off to somewhere else, and now you just came back. We don't know how you know this stuff. Why didn't you say this at the beginning? And then in the 1994 version, as Zazu falls off the rock, a gopher pops up and tells Zazu hyenas have been spotted. And that's what gets Zazu to come back up, snap Mufasa out of it. And then Mufasa goes, oh, I have to be king now. So it all flows a lot better and also establishes characterization in the original one. And in this one, it's just things happen because they happened in the movie without understanding why those things happened.
I think two things can be true at once with the points you just brought up. I think the first point can be true, that explains what is off about this movie. It explains the maybe fast forwarding through the script because the audience or the filmmakers are just like, okay, people know this beat. We don't have to establish it as well. And I think the second point that can also be true is that is an over analyzing of a scene that can almost feel like a nitpick. And I'm not going to push back on you. I'm going to say that falls a little bit more into the nitpicky range while also explaining what's just off about this film. Because like, I think if we somehow do the impossible and remove the context of the 1990s cartoon, I don't think that scene necessarily plays bad. I think it plays bad in comparison to the 90s cartoon. But what it also does establish, though, right away, again, to your point, is that there's just shortcuts being taken in this film that don't establish the emotional core of what's going to happen in the second and third
Right.
act.
There are the changes that are made in that scene, and there are plenty of others that that we don't need to go into as in detail as I just did. I kind of went down to the molecular level.
I think that's correct to do so, because I think the morning report in specifically is a scene that it's really easy to point to that. Like, it's really easy to be like, this is where it's just fundamentally doesn't understand what the cartoon understands in storytelling.
Right. The changes that were made in that scene and in other scenes only serve to kneecap the plot and kneecap what was there. It's like if that certain aspect, I'm not saying that it was flawless in Lion King 1994, but it worked. It served multiple purposes.
Yeah.
And it doesn't it's not as strong of a scene as it was. And like you said, if it was just Lion King 2019, sure, fine, that would work. But it's the fact that it worked so much better in 1994, and the change didn't do anything except hinder that moment and lessen later impacts.
And that's the struggle with talking about this movie in any form of an interesting dialogue about this movie, because essentially to talk about this movie, you have to kind of critique the minutiae of this movie, because on the just grandiose scale of this movie,
on the wide strokes,
it's a really beautiful, broad story that echoes obviously Hamlet and Shakespeare. It has the father-son drama. It's all there. The beats that you like from the original are all here, yet it somehow doesn't feel cohesive. So it's the struggle right there, right? Of, again, this point that you just brought up, which again, I think is a really important point, that somehow feels both minute and unimportant, but also seems to summarize and be the thesis of what doesn't work about this movie.
Right.
Right? Like, that's the tough part about talking about this movie.
It's that whole idea of like, it looks good if you squint. And it's like, sure, like if we're talking broad strokes, then yeah, it's the Lion King.
Yeah, and it's the thing, like, if you have never
it's a timeless story.
If you have never seen The Lion King or have never read Shakespeare, and this was your first interaction with that source material, you would probably watch this film and be like, this is a really moving, beautiful film about a son who loses his father and now must take back his rightful throne from his uncle who killed the father. Like, that's such a broad, general story of the hero's journey that it completely works on that level. It's just this weird issue with this film. And when I'm talking about the fact that, like, when I'm discussing this film, when we are talking about this film, I can't not talk about the 90s version. And the reason that becomes so difficult is because I'm now trying to talk about a movie that is, for all regards, well loved and to some probably flawless. And I'm now saying, yeah, everything about that movie that you loved in the 1990s is in this movie, and it doesn't work, but it's technically brilliant. And that's why I brought up a point earlier, Branson, with, Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast and Jungle Book, or even like Alice in Wonderland, Tim Burton. Hate it or not, Tim Burton has a very direct style. Now, that's a bad example now that I say it out loud, because that's technically a sequel to the Disney one, but let's take one that actually isn't. Let's take two that have come out recently. Aladdin and Pinocchio. Is it fair to say, what's up?
I need to quickly relight my scene here. I'm starting to get I'm starting to get the Shadowlands on my face here.
I will just say, for all of you watching, thank you for listening to this episode. Again, thank you all for the support. I have that new power ranking series going on YouTube and my podcast feed, the Ben Bran See a Movie podcast feed. So thank you all for listening to that. My episode did really well last week about power rankings, best supporting actor. Boy, was I maybe off on some of those. I did not know that Hirsch was going to get maybe the more push over Paul Dano for The Fabelmans. But yeah, it's a really a series I'm really enjoying. And this week we're back with Best Adapted Screenplay. But Branson has joined me once again, and we were talking about, I was going to bring up the point, Branson, of two movies. Is it fair to say that you have not seen Pinocchio, the newest one?
I have not.
Is it also fair to assume you probably did not see Will Smith's Aladdin?
I also did not see Aladdin.
That is completely understandable. What I'm going to defend about...
I just dropped your light. Sorry.
That's fine. What I am going to defend about both these movies, just in like 15 seconds or less. Will Smith, the genie is that original classic one. Like, that energy is so tied into Robin Williams that when you change that energy with a different performer, the whole vibe of the movie just changes. And Will Smith's a very different type of performer than Robin Williams. Yes, they're both over the top, but it does really just change the, again, not story of it, but it just changes the feel of the movie. Pinocchio is a little bit harder because it is probably more in line with, let's say, The Lion King. There are some artistic flares where Zemeckis and Hanks really try to tie in the movie more to an emotional story about a father and son. What I mean by that is, spoiler alert for anyone who has not seen the Pinocchio, Branson, I do apologize, because the newest Pinocchio, the whole thing about it is like kind of the big change they make. Geppetto makes Pinocchio not just for fun or because he's this craftsman. He's lost his wife and son, and he kind of makes Pinocchio as like not necessarily a replacement of his son, but just something for company, so he's not alone in his workshop anymore. So it's a much more emotionally trying film. Now, you can then criticize the choice to do that, whether you should just take a Pinocchio and be the big change you make to it is, oh, it's more emotional because his family's dead. Like, you could totally criticize that beat. But it does change the context of Geppetto and Pinocchio's relationship. And when Geppetto goes out searching for it, there's now this kind of internal Tom Hanks performance, and Tom Hanks is quite good in the film, where it's now like almost like fear of losing another kid. So it does retextualize the classic story in this sense. The Lion King doesn't have any of those beats, where it's like something just even slightly new or one additional plot point that really changes it. Their additional plot point in this is, let's give Beyonce a new song to sell us more albums.
Spirit!
And it's a fine enough song. I don't hate the song. It's well composed enough, but it doesn't do anything besides that. So that's kind of my idea on this. And Branson, so we can start wrapping it up semi-soon, I'm going to make a new rule as we talk about the rest of the movie.
Okay.
We each only get twice to compare it to the original cartoon. So you already used yours for Morning Report.
Yeah, all right. That's fair.
I'm going to use mine real quick. I'm going to use one of my two real quick. For the scene where I just knew, I remember seeing this movie in theaters and knew the exact scene I checked out completely. And it's the Scar Be Prepared scene. They make one huge weird decision. Scar isn't intimidating or scary. He's just kind of malnourished and like almost like a crack addict look to him. Like he's like really skinny. It looks like his fur's kind of clumping or falling off. He just looks very ratty. And it's just like, that's the change from like, Jeremy Irons being Jeremy Irons and, overcooking it. That when Jeremy Irons does it in the original one, he is quite a devilish villain who is relishing in the fact of how
delightfully
evil he is.
Devilish, Seymour.
In this one, steamed hams. In this one, he's just like, it's not even that I felt bad for him, but I'm like, oh yeah, there's like one there's one lion, and there's like this group of lions that apparently just live way worse than the king. And it just looks and feels sadder, and it also just makes Scar a non-intimidating villain. Everything about this Be Prepared scene is weird. One, to the fact that they don't even let Chiwetel Ejiofor do the song. He kind of hits the beats of the song. Like there's moments where he says lines from it, but he's kind of doing slam poetry.
Do you know why it's like that?
I can't assume it's because he can't sing, because I have a feeling he probably is actually pretty decent at it.
It's worse. They originally, if you can believe this, cut that song from this release of The Lion King.
I did know this fact. I heard about this on the Blank. Sorry, I heard about this on the Blank Check podcast. They were talking about this.
For some reason, for those of you who don't know, they originally cut Be Prepared, one of the best Disney villain songs, in my opinion. They originally cut it from the film, and people were like, why did you do this? And Disney was like, oh, Dip, you were right. And so what we get is this kind of limp-wristed delivery.
Slam poetry, like reading of Be Prepared. It's really
the beatnik,
weird.
Yeah, the Smoky Lounge beatnik mix of Be Prepared.
This is another time where I'm able to point to the digital filmmaking and actually point out an issue that, again, with other movies, I don't notice it, but it's just so atmospherically boring. Everything kind of has this gray wash to it. So every scene just kind of either feels smoky or a little oversaturated with the sun. And it just makes everything, one, look the same and have no style. And it's this weird thing where it's just like, we have the picture of the Sahara on our background right now, which I know you can't really tell, but there are kind of just shades and like even how the sand looks, where this one, it is just like, it's not even like these bright sand colors. It's like a very, okay, well, this is like the most technical looking sand we can get. And it's going to be a really gray wash brown sand that just kind of looks more like dirt.
They Zack Snydered it.
And dirt and dust. But even Snyder adds like
I
colors.
I knew.
Like this one is just like
if I said that, you'd be like, no.
This one is just like a full on like gray, where it's just like the the color palette of this movie is brown, really. Like that's what it is. It's kind of this just brown washed film that just never really looks particularly beautiful to look at. So as the scenes are going, I can't even get lost in the CGI because I'm watching the CGI and special effects. I'm like, yeah, they're really good. I kind of wish like, the sky was blue, not just like, light.
Right. It always overcast.
Yeah, and it's just like, well, that's because that's what the Sahara looks like when we were taking our photos and we were doing and all this. And it's like, yeah, but that's the artistic ability right there, is to then realize like maybe this film looks a little bit better if it's just like more colorful and fun, like something more engaging to the audience, because like you have everything else. Yeah, of course. And like,
okay,
that's the
last time I'll do that.
I have one more time that I'll use it. And again, this is an issue that happens. The Stampede scene, same thing, where it's just like, there's no real emotion. Like if you watch the scene back to back, and I'll put like the clips from each one. If you watch like, Simba's reaction to seeing his father fall and be stampled versus the reaction in here, one of them looks again like a lion, and then the other one looks like, a son who is watching his father get trampled to death. There is just this disconnect. And this is not to put any of this on the voice actor of Simba, who I think is I actually think the voice actor for young Simba is giving a really good performance.
I can't remember his name.
He's fairly talented. JD McCrae, who was in the...
I was going to say Salinger.
Yeah, he is absolutely...
JD Salinger is
Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah.
I knew the reference. Don't worry.
Okay, but I'm making sure.
I think he gives a decent, enough strong vocal performance.
Yeah,
it's just like they don't do anything with it. We get to the Stampede scene.
There
And
is
now
one. There is one part in Just Can't Wait to Be King where he gets pitch corrected to the wrong note.
Yeah, but again, it's just like, it's fine. It's like he's doing the job of this role, I think, quite adequately, especially with a tough role to follow up. Now we kind of get into, I guess, where the film... I'm out on this film, and this is the only saving grace of the film, is the Timon and Pumbaa stuff. And this is just Favreau kind of understanding, like, okay, I have Seth Rogen and I have Billy Eichner, who seemingly have great chemistry with one another. Let's kind of let them riff.
Go. Yeah.
And it actually works. The issue, or not even the issue, but the difference is, like when I said Aladdin, when they let Will Smith riff as the genie is such an over-encompassing presence within that movie that it does change the whole tone of the film around him. These characters are supporting characters to Simba, so it really is the difference of the jokes feel different, or the jokes are different, but it doesn't actually change the tonal consistency of the film. So it's not like you're watching and be like, okay, now it's the Timon and Pumbaa, and this is where the film really is brought to life. It's like, no, this is the Timon and Pumbaa scene, and they just happen to have really funny lines in it because they're two really funny actors. But it's not like anything actually like changes tonally with this film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that one felt fairly similar, and like I said, the only thing was getting over that hump of you're not Nathan Lane. I think that Seth Rogen was actually a great, I can't believe I'm saying this, I think Seth Rogen was a great casting choice for the modern retelling of Pumbaa.
Like I said, I like them both, and it is just this thing where they bring some energy. I think there's some really good jokes they deliver when they are just straight up making fun of other Disney properties, where they do the scene "Be Our Guest."
I was so thrown off guard.
That scene to me is actually legitimately a funny beat that adds something that feels exciting to the film. And then, like I said, those scenes are so far and few between.
That was actually pretty exciting. Because I recognized the opening of that when he was like, I can't remember the line now, but it's what
Madame, prepare for complimentary dinner.
Yes, I was like, I know that this is a quote of something else,
and
then he started saying, "Be Your Guest," and I was like, oh my gosh! And then as soon as I realized it, it's like, okay, now we continue with the joke, which is the song abruptly gets cut off. It's like, that's great.
Straight up. It's not only a parody of Be Our Guest, it's a straight up recreation of the 2017 Beauty and the Beast. It's definitely pulled more from that timing of the line that Ewan McGregor does. But like I said, that's a moment where it's like, okay, they're doing something kind of fresh with this movie. There's scenes of that throughout. Like if I recall, I think like, some of the cast members like have like a joke or two, like John Oliver, if I recall, like he has a few like lines here or there, or like Eichner and Rogen, as we've obviously talked about, like Donald Glover gets some lines. Like it's again, not that like it's a straight up retelling of the script. It's not like they're going beat per beat for line. I mean, it probably is 90% that, but there is like a little bit where you're like, okay, that's a definitive change in it. It's just that none of those changes actually change the overall feeling of the story. And that's where this film kind of makes a mistake. The one scene that, if you got the morning report, I want to hate on this scene because it pissed me off when I saw it in theaters in July of 2019. It still angers me to this day.
Go off, King.
It is the "Can You Feel the Love Tonight" song, the montage. So let's talk about this. And do be aware when I said, "Can you feel the love tonight?" That's a key phrase. Why is this one shot in the day? Why is there absolutely, again, I guess, why is there not? There is completely any lack of emotion. I would be 1,000% shocked if Donald Glover and Beyonce actually met each other to record this song. There is no passion to it. Beyonce is a very talented actress and sing, or I'm not going to say actress. I meant singer. As an actress, she's fine. I think at best, fine to good at in some roles that utilize her strengths. For instance, when she's singing, that's a strength of hers in like Dreamgirls, where it's like, okay, that's Beyonce singing like a star, which is something she can do. In this, it's like requiring her to have this emotional residency with Donald Glover. And again, one, I would just have to venture the guess they're not in the studio together.
No.
They're just kind of, it feels just not even disjointed. I think it's edited all well together enough, but there is absolutely no passion. There is no inclination of why Simba would then, from that scene on, turn around. And then, Chew, this is the song where we want these lions to, apologies, I might censor this, we want these lions to there is no passion in this scene. There is nothing about this. We know what they're doing in the 90s. Maybe when we're 6, we don't know. But we all know when you sing Can You Feel the Love Tonight? We all know what that's implying. We all know what that's getting to.
Yeah, dude,
this it's not.
Nala gives him straight up bedroom eyes in the original.
And you know what this lion does in this movie? You know what Nala does in this movie? She looks like a lion to him. And they're just two lions looking at each other,
just
lying
two lions looking at each other.
And it's like, no, you misunderstand. We like it when these characters have a passion, a soul, when they have the desire to get down. You know what? Another egregious mistake this movie does. Scar is not sexy in this movie. Absolutely hideous to look at. There is no charm. There is nobody interested.
Sexy lions, you should have just gone to like Tumblr or something, man.
Yeah,
I don't know why you're looking. I don't know why you're looking at this.
But that's a sexy lion in the 90s. These are sexy caricatures. Now we're just like left with these like gross looking things. Like no, like now it's just like a lion. Like that's just weird. Before it's like Jeremy Irons with a lot of just like bestial hair. Like now it's just not that. I don't like it as much. Like it's just like
Ben's a furry?
Yeah, dude, you've taken out the passion and love and sexiness of the original one. That's kind of my big rant on this. It's not sexy enough anymore.
Ben's a furry? Confirmed?
Yeah, confirmed. Yeah, so that's my biggest issue with this film is that one scene. It is the scene of Can You Feel the Love Tonight? Because joking aside, it actually does just not understand like why these two, you don't have any inclination of why these two characters, one, he would care about her, two, why he would go back for her, and three, like how they would fall in love. That sequence in the original one, you totally believe that they loved each other as kids. They have now fallen in love again, and that Simba would now risk it all to go back and reclaim the throne. Right. And that is the crux of the hero's journey. And in this, the hero's journey doesn't fall apart because you don't believe the journey he is on. It's a storytelling flaw.
Mm-hmm. Right. And again, it goes back to that issue of there not being emotion and story and characterization that is exhibited through nonverbal means. You don't have body language from a lion, from a real lion, because guess what? It's a real freaking lion. A real lion can't look passive aggressive. A real lion can't give, bedroom eyes. A real lion can't give a sexy look. A real lion just looks like a lion.
And here's the thing. I'm sure there will be somebody in our comment section. Well, actually, lions communicate completely 80% through verbal or non-verbals, like, gestures to one another, that actually they're communicating the same way we do through facial expression.
Yeah,
we just can't notice it. Yeah, exactly. We don't understand the language of that, right? Where maybe a lion... Yeah.
My cat does not understand when I look at her like...
Yeah,
when she like kicks litter all over the floor, she's just like, I am a cat. I am going to continue to do this thing.
And again,
Why?
we just like we can't
Hi,
make
human.
sense of that. It's like it's maybe that is completely true, and maybe it's like, oh well, actually, this lying and is this scene is actually prohibiting the signs of they are down to boink, but it's not communicated to us in any meaningful way.
Right.
And it's just the issue of, again, it's the classic Jurassic Park line where it's you were so busy asking yourself the question, can we, that you never stop to answer the question, should we? And that's what this movie is. It is a technical achievement that never actually questions its need to exist. It never seems to ask the question of itself, why should this movie exist? What are we doing that actually makes this movie worthwhile if you remove the special effects? And the answer is nothing. There is nothing about this movie that exists in meaningful way. This movie isn't bad. It is just a plain nothing to me. I feel nothing when watching this movie. It is so deeply cynical. It is such a cash grab. That's what this movie is. This movie's only purpose is designed to be a $1.6 billion movie. After
took nearly
that,
75
it has
minutes, but we're
nothing.
getting mad, Ben, now.
Yeah. Like I said, after that, this movie offers nothing of interest, nothing of value. It has no artistic integrity to stand on.
Right. It's a porridge. It's just porridge. There's no meat, which is ironic because it's all about carnivorous animals.
Yeah.
And I think it sounds like we're about wrapping up, unless there's more that you have to say.
Everybody knows how the Lion King ends.
Yeah, it's the Lion King.
It's the Lion King. He defeats Scar. He gets thrown in. The hyenas eat him. The circle of life happens again.
I do quite like the final battle. It does seem more epic. I think it's stupid that Scar went to the top of Pride Rock. That just seemed kind of short-sighted, but I can't remember if that happens in the original. I think it does.
Like I said, it's whatever for me, where it's like, yeah, it looks good. I get
fine.
The emotion. Yeah. It's, again, just nothing like... And, I mean, like, the most powerful scene in this movie is, again, the most powerful scene in the original. And, again, it's still kind of less than... My favorite scene from 94's Lion King is the scene where he reclaims the throne, where the Hans Zimmer music kicks in. I think it's called Pride Rock. And it's basically, I think it's the monkey, the bamboo, we haven't actually talked about it. I actually think the actor who voices the monkey is quite good in this movie. Yeah, Rafiki. I think the voice actor in this movie is one of the best aspects. It's John Canny from Captain America Civil War. He played T'Chaka in he's Black Panther's dad.
Okay.
He's a really damn good actor. And so the lines really hit. He has this like different energy where he seems a little bit, maybe not even stoic, but just of more sound mind. And he has this kind of quiet dignity, which Rafiki is kind of the Yoda in the original cartoon, where he's just like this guy that you actually realize is brilliant, but he kind of just seems crazy. So you get this scene, right, where Rafiki tells him it is now time for you to take your place in the circle of life. And he goes up the mountain, and it's the classic Hans Zimmer music. Dun, 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 dun. And, the rain's pouring down on him.
He blesses the rain down in Africa.
Yeah. Mufasa has maybe one of the most iconic, and this is James Earl Jones just getting to be James Earl Jones, where he just says, exactly, remember. And then the roar that happens. It's such a powerful scene and ending to Simba's hero's journey that then gets followed up by the repeating of the circle of life, which makes for just a really beautiful ending. That ending is still here. It still has the Mufasa scene. When that line happens in the movies, I get chills because that is James Earl Jones doing it. Do I wish that the lion is covered more in rain? I do. I do wish that he's drenched, because there is just kind of this like...
is this going back to you wishing the lions were more sexy?
No, it is but it is like this idea of like when they're soaked, right, in the original cartoon, he's kind of
rain glistening off their lion muscles.
He's climbing up the mountain, and you kind of feel the weight of it. it's overcoming adversity in that scene, because it's again this idea of he's getting poured down on, and yet he still climbs up to the top to take his place. In this one, it's just like, I wish there was more rain on him. Again, just so this idea of like, he's still overcoming feels more powerful, but it's still like the ending. Like, I can watch the ending and be like, that is still an emotionally powerful like beat, because that is such an emotionally powerful beat originally. And that's just like, it's so powerful that it transcends text, basically, where it's like anybody who does that interpretation, whether it's on Broadway, whether it's animated, whether it's live action, however you want to do that scene will always have an emotional resonance to it, because that scene is so expertly written and done. And as long as you stick to that, it's going to be that. So the ending works on all those degrees. But again, it's just the case of this movie. It's just the issue with this overarching movie is not that it's not as good as the original movie, but it's just passionless. And it is the case of, it is a tech demo, as you said so brilliantly early on. It is simply, look what we can do. And at the end of the day, you watch it and you're like, yeah, you did that. I wish there was something more to this movie. I wish that the storytelling of this movie lived up to what the visual effects offer, but also realize that the visual effects and the storytelling can't coexist, because again, you have this emotionlessness due to the special effects. But if you then take it away, and it's this, again, this other huge tangent that I can't really go on, but it's this issue now of, okay, let's say you now get rid of the special effects, make it a little more cartoony. Now what do you have? You just have a cartoon, which is the original thing. So now you have this live action cartoon, which is already what it is, but if you make it more cartoony looking, it's just even closer to resemblance of the original one. It's just a mess in every way possible. It's a poorly conceived idea.
Right. And two things that I'll end on, and then we can wrap up.
Yeah.
But the original is not going to be replaced by this film. And
if anything,
I don't
it should
know
be
if
a
that
companion.
Right. At the most.
That's what the other films are. Like,
and
I like Aladdin as a companion, not necessarily as its like own thing.
Right. When most people think of Lion King, they will think of the original. And I'm sure that with Pinocchio and with Aladdin,
Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, Little Mermaid, all of it.
When people think of those, they will maybe Disney will prove us wrong maybe they'll prove me wrong with Pinocchio. I'm assuming that they won't. Maybe they'll prove me wrong with Little Mermaid. I don't know. But it's these movies don't do enough different to make to carve out their own niche, you know.
Exactly.
And there are movies that do that. There are remakes of films that have done way better. For some reason I'm drawing a blank on like every example, but I know
like
that there
the Planet of the Apes. The Planet of the Apes new trilogy.
That's a great example.
Special effects. Some of the best you'll ever see in film, and it's its own story from the original. Now, again, this is kind of the thing of, is it a prequel series, whatever you want to say about that. But it is like telling a story that you already know, that you know some of the bigger beats for, and then recontextualizing it to make something new.
Right.
And it pulls that off quite successfully.
It respects and adds on.
This is a bad movie, but Charlie and the Chocolate Factory does that to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Now, you can say one of them is way more successful than the other, and one of them might be a garbage fire, but you can't say that those two films are not completely tonally and everything opposite from each other. They are of its own style, of its own visual narrative, all of that. They can completely exist independently. The Lion King 2019 has to exist codependent with the cartoon, while also can't be anything more
while living in
because of that. Exactly.
Right.
It's
it will be in the shadow of its predecessor.
It's a Kobayashi Maru in this situation. Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
And with that actually goes perfectly into my last point. My camera battery's blinking at me. So this will be my last say on the matter. But there are so many properties. I can think of two right off the bat, and you might be able to guess it. I think I've discussed it with you off air before. There are quite a few properties that Disney has that are animated films that are beloved, that don't have they're beloved, but they don't have quite the impact or the gravitas that something like Lion King has. That would be, I think, really cool live action films. And the two that
Yeah,
I'm thinking of,
I can name them. It is Chicken Little, and it is Home on the Range.
yep, you got it. No, shut the frick up.
You're like
It's
Zach Braff should play the live action Chicken Little.
oh my gosh, no! It
Roseanne
Atlantis.
Barr would be great in Home on the Range.
Shut up! No, not Home on the Range. Atlantis and
Treasure
Planet
Planet, yeah.
would be so cool, live action. But Disney's not going to do it because you know why?
Because it's not
Because
$1 billion guarantee.
bingo.
It is solely a cash grab. That's why
they're not going to make money.
that's
So they're not
that's
gonna do
why
it.
they're looking at the specific ones. That's why they're rebooting the Renaissance. That's why they're remaking, the classic Snow Whites and Pinocchio, the ones that are still at Disneyland, the ones that when you're done with the movie and you're going to Disneyland, maybe you're hyping yourself up. Oh, Little Mermaid. Just finished the new Little Mermaid coming out in May 2023. I'm going to
gonna go ride the
Disneyland
ride.
in like a month. I want to ride Ariel's Grotto. I want to buy Little Mermaid merchandise. Even if they're not buying the live action one, they're still buying Little Mermaid. Maybe it inspires them to go watch the other one. It's the same with all the Pinocchio. I'll go ride Pinocchio's journey at Adventureland. It's the same over and over again where it's
That's in
just like
Fantasyland.
Fantasyland. You're right, Fantasyland.
Fake
It's
fan.
all of these ones where you're just like watching it. In fairness, which one's Adventureland?
That's the one with Tarzan's treehouse and Indiana Jones.
Oh, I always get that one confused because it's so small. Because it's like right between
Yeah,
New Orleans and like
yeah,
you're
it's
just
sort
like
of
you
it
kind of
sort of
forget
bleeds
that it's
into
like
New Orleans.
I always just consider that area New Orleans, even though I know it's not. But yeah, it is just this thing where it's just like, again, Little Mermaid could be completely like a flop, but it's still probably going to have people going back to either buy the new merchandise or
Or go
buy the
watch
old Ben. And still,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden, you're still making these properties interesting. Treasure Planet,
So in one sense, Disney probably does win either way
they,
in terms of monetary gain, but what they lose in terms of creative respect, in terms of creativity and artistry and honesty is, I think that makes me lose respect for Disney as a company. Disney, the multimedia conglomerate. Disney,
yeah.
the animation studio, beautiful. Pixar, beautiful. It's the suits,
Yeah, it is
Like I
just the
said.
straight up issue where it's
Mhm.
just like, and that's where we are right now in Hollywood in general. It's so easy to point at this at Disney because they kind of feel like the most obvious offenders of this, but it's a trend we're seeing, and this is solely an executive decision to make money, but again, have no passion. I don't have any ill will towards Jon Favreau. I think he's a really brilliant
Yeah,
filmmaker when he is like utilized correctly. I think The Jungle Book is a damn great movie that I think is better than the cartoon. It is just the case of when it's all said and done, nobody could have directed this and made it particularly interesting.
Every
And
director has films that miss the mark, and this
Yeah.
one just missed the mark.
Yeah, and when it comes to it all said and done, The Lion King is just a movie that I have no respect for, no care for, but also just don't really put any thought into on an artistic level. There's films that I saw. I saw a movie today called Sharpstick, which is directed and written by Lena Dunham. I hated the movie. I thought the movie was bad. But when I was still done with it, I was still able to say, because I knew we were going to be talking about The Lion King later, I'm like, you know what? even though I hate this film, I'm not a particularly big fan of the filmmaker's writer of this just in general. I can still see there's some artistic ability that she's putting in that has no emotional resonance towards me, but I can at least understand that she's trying something. I don't connect with it at all, and in fact, I think it's quite bad and misses the mark completely, but at least I can see something and take away something and say that is a piece of art that should exist. This is a piece of art, technically, because it is, but it has none of the passion behind that besides the special effects wizards who deserve everything in the world for this movie. It's just that they were forced to make a project that made no fundamental sense for them to even start to make. That's my closing thoughts on The Lion King.
That's a good place to stop, I think.
I don't think we need a great debate this week.
No.
I don't think we need it at all.
I think we went in hard enough.
Yeah. With that said, Branson, thank you for joining me on today's episode of The Lion King. I just want to wrap up real quick and just say next week on this show, Rosie Moorhead will be joining me, and we are going to be talking not necessarily a movie, though we might touch on hints of the movie. We're going to actually be doing more of a tabloid show where we're going to be going deep dive into the Don't Worry Darling controversy from the past month with Florence Pugh, with Olivia Wilde, with Harry Styles, everything that's been reporting in the press, everything that happened in Venice. We're going deep dive on gossip while also possibly discussing the film if we get a chance to see it before that podcast records. And
you're going to be a tea channel?
We're going to be doing the tea next week. And then
he's spilling the tea.
Make sure, guys, if you haven't already, check out my new video series that I'll be doing weekly, Oscar Power Rankings, where I'll be breaking down a category for the upcoming 2023 Oscars, and I'll be doing the power rankings for each one. With that all said, guys, if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe. You can find me on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, at Beneverse_media. This is Branson Indelcada, my co-host, who will be joining me sometime again in the future.
You'll see me again. Follow me if you want. I don't care.
Yeah. So, my name is Ben Friedman. He's Branson Indelcada. Thank you guys for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.